Buenas tardes. Les agradecemos que hayan venido para conocer un poquito los resultados que ha...
Thank you for being present to see the results that the Ministerial meeting on trade and investment has had. The group has met in Mar del Plata for the last 3 days, and since last night we've had a ministerial meeting with quite an intense working agenda, because we met at 8:30 and we have been working continuously until a few minutes ago, when we concluded our work with a statement made by the participating ministers, which is going to be available to all of you. I think that the meeting we have just had takes place at a time which is quite critical for international trade, and this has allowed us to have a very open dialogue with the participating ministers, and the objective is to strengthen cooperation and create conditions that will rekindle confidence in the benefit of, regarding the benefits of international trade. All the ministers that have participated were positive and contributed greatly to the dialogue that our presidency proposed, which is searching for shared solutions in order to reach, through these solutions, sustainable growth, so that we can keep open markets and consolidate economic development and contribute somehow or other to revitalizing the international trade system. I think that G20 meeting at the trade ministers level have coincided that it is urgent to debate the ways in which the WTO works, so that this relevant organization for countries that are vouching for multilateralism can face through the organization the challenges posed by trade, and that at the same time the organization should be able to adapt to the challenges that exist today, challenges posed by the Industrial Revolution, which is quite recent. These challenges are impacting the way in which we work, produce, and trade. I think that we have talked about value chains and the participation of member countries, especially countries such as Argentina, farming countries, their participation in the global value chains regarding agribusiness and agri-food, and we've devoted a specific segment to the impact that technological revolution has. We have also emphasized the challenges presented in this new trade reality for small, medium, and micro companies. And also we've mentioned the role to be played by women and the challenges faced by women vis-à-vis the new trade reality, which adds an additional challenge regarding a greater participation of women in economic activities. As you all know, the G20 Argentina presidency has an understanding that has to do with the participation of women, and this is cross-cutting to all the issues of G20, and we also want to ensure all G20 issues that will contribute to generating growth and well-being, focused on an inclusive approach. Not leaving anyone behind is a motto that is ever present, so the G20, in its results, in its high-level dialogues that have been held and continue to be held throughout the year, can become a reality. So we welcome the effort of all ministers. They have agreed on a common denominator, which has allowed us to have the ministerial statement which has been distributed, and it shows that through dialogue and by searching common ground, we can build a new reality, and this reality must be adapted to the changes of the world regarding the ways in which we work, produce and trade. So trying to find common ground, we have achieved this result, which is an extremely positive step, an achievement by the Argentina presidency of G20, because this is one of the thorny issues of the year. G20 is a forum for dialogue. We don't have mandatory solutions from here, but we do have proposals for resolutions so that we can work jointly. So having said that, we are open together with Minister Sica to respond to any question. Cecilia Caminos from the German press agency. I'd like to ask you about the point which says that the need to reform the WTO is urgent. Is the November meeting in Geneva confirmed? Have you mentioned specific proposals about progressing along the lines of a WTO reform? We, in most of the conversations, both in the informal meeting at breakfast as well as what we have mentioned in the specific panel about the specific conditions of trade, we all share that it is extremely important and compelling that we can find responses so that the WTO can be more responsive to the challenges posed by trade today. The meeting you mentioned has been established. We do not establish here the items on the agenda, the order, or anything on the agenda, but throughout the conversations, different countries, especially the main players in international trade, they've told us about their visions and points of view in order to progress with this reform and what should and must be reformed and what must be preserved. The most relevant element, the fact that we are talking about the WTO reform, means that we all coincide on the fact that we need to have an agency such as the World Organization that will allow us to establish rules, that will allow us to work along the frameworks of international trade. This work validates the existence of the organization, and that's the most important element. Good afternoon. Nicolás Gallardo, Radio Mitre, Mar del Plata, elmarplatense.com. A question for each one of you, especially we have been talking this afternoon with the Spanish minister, pointing at progress regarding a free trade agreement between Mercosur and European Union. Which was Argentina's contribution? And do you agree with the fact that an agreement may be reached towards the end of the year, something mentioned or hinted at by the minister, and especially for Minister Sica? How can Argentina bet on modernization, especially regarding world trade? And I would like to have a summary of bilateral meetings, especially the cooperation agreements with Spain or other countries involved. Thank you. First of all, Argentina is extremely committed to the process of negotiation within Mercosur with the European Union. We have worked, and this has been our contribution throughout the year, about working on solutions for each one of the issues that have been discussed. As I have said repeatedly, we are in the final stages regarding the most delicate and thorny issues for the two parties, and we are within a dialogue that allows us to come to some kind of an agreement. Negotiations have been going on in Montevideo throughout the week, and Cecilia Malmström came straight from Brussels to Mar del Plata. We are concluding with the political and technical dialogue that is still needed in order to progress in the briefest possible time. Regarding the integration strategy of our companies in international trade, we have been working for 2.5 years in the government with a normalization or standardization policy, a trade policy. We're coming from a closed discretionary policy, and we are going towards an open foreign trade. We've progressed under the umbrella of the WTO standards. We have dismantled the previous system. We have a license system that works in a regulated manner. We are working strongly regarding technical guidelines, and not from the obstacles to trade point of view, but rather a more offensive, aggressive point of view, so that our companies are prepared to compete abroad. We have a very big agenda regarding regulatory convergence and trade facilitation. That's the main difficulty, more than tariffs, in order to open markets and to have to sell our products abroad. We must think that in the last year, only for the farming sector, 160 markets were opened up, and out of which 70 have Argentine products. And we have a policy that has to do with debureaucratizing the foreign trade, and we will have one-stop only window for foreign trade. It's going to be more advantageous for small and medium-sized enterprises, and this goes along the lines of what has been debated today. When we especially take a look at the second panel, where all technological changes, trade facilitation, the new industrial revolution were dealt with, we were talking about 4.0, but Korea and Japan are with 5.0. So it has to do with facilitating SMEs internationalization, access through debureaucratization processes. And we are working strongly so that this technological progress will not generate or create a new digital divide that will finally impact SMEs. That's our main focus regarding our government policy. We want to debureaucratize the access to those media and a very strong exporting profile. Regarding bilateral meetings, we had many that we held with the foreign minister. We have to work with Spain. We are not having free trade. We are working on Mercosur and European Union, but we're trying to have experiences from those countries that have progressed in these internationalization policies, supporting SMEs, so that we can have a positive agenda for technology transfer and know-how transfer, so that it will enable us to learn from their mistakes and progress faster and deepen our policies.
Good afternoon, Sofia Diamante, La Nación newspaper, and I wanted to ask both of you, what does it mean for Argentina to have managed to get the draft statement signed jointly by all the members? I think it's the second time in the last 5 years. And in the second place, how did the sessions and the meeting go today in the midst of the tension between the trade war between the U.S. and China? I think you yourself have answered your own question. The importance that the document has had is the second time in the last 5 years that the G20 can issue a text in this regard amidst the tensions there are in international trade. To tell you the truth, it was very candid debate with all the members, the G20 members, attending the meeting, where each one, in a framework of differences but of great respect and coincidence in other scopes, has really made progress all day long. For the Argentine G20 presidency, this has been one of the sectors, the thematic sectors that we've engaged in all along throughout the year, and we're pleased that Argentina played the role that was stated right at the beginning of its presidency, to be a fair broker, an honest broker, as we hear in G20 jargon. We know within our potential, with our economy, sitting at the table of the big international forum that the G20 is, having 80% of the worldwide GDP present, Argentina did its job well, to be an honest broker and to get people to agree, as the Minister for Production said. Actually, the countries with greater involvement in the world trade said what they wanted to say, but tried to identify common spots, and regarding the differences they had, they were open enough to say that they needed to build upon a new and work on a new strategy to reach international trade. Carolina Michian, Bloomberg Agency Minister, in the context of today's announcements and protectionist measures such as the barriers that the U.S. has established for China, what is the G20 position in respect of this? Obviously, measures, new tariffs, hindering or being a surcharge on trade are not positive. But I believe that the dialogue within the G20 scope means that we need to find a solution, and that the solutions we need to build together, not just the main trade players that sometimes don't see eye to eye, but rather all the countries, not just the G20 countries, all the countries that suffer the indirect consequences of these actions and measures that have an impact on our own commercial, economic, and financial standing. But you know that the job can be done if we all identify points in common, spots in common, and try to find solutions. What's important now, both in regard of what happens between two main players of the international trade as for the rest of the countries, the dialogue to build to generate a solution. Clearly, in the short term, it may not be as important, but every time these processes begin, you know, the trade war, quote unquote, we need to see afterwards whether any countries benefit from them or, on the contrary, suffer from them. But we need to see how things evolve, because if this, in the end, generates a negotiations whereby they reach a consensus and agreement, the impact that one at the beginning might have seen was great, in the end isn't that much. When we begin these processes, there's also expectations in the middle term regarding trade. So thank you very much. Thank you all. Good afternoon to you all.